It's now 1:03 p.m. and I would like to reconvene back to open session. And just to get us kind of reestablished here, Ms. Cruz, would you please do a roll call?
Yes. Dr. Paris.
Present.
Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams.
Present, sorry.
Oh, found ya. Ms. Cruz, present. Dr. Daniels.
Present.
Mr. Sweet.
Present.
All right, quorum established.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to move back we're going to move to agenda item number 7. And again, thanks everyone for allowing us to take a few items out of order and kind of make it all work today. Okay, so really just a brief update from the FCLB, the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards, District 1 and 4 meeting. And we are, as you're aware, we have the opportunity to have representatives to not just the FCLB, but also the MBCE. And typically the board assigns these representatives based on chair and vice chair positions. But that doesn't have to be the only way to do it, nor does it have to be the only board members who might attend some of these meetings. And so if there's ever any other interest from the board, we would surely appreciate that and entertain that. And also I would encourage all of our board members to to see if there's an opportunity to take part in into the future. If you have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. So we, for the October 4th and 5th meeting, our California is in District 4, and they held their regional meeting was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the full agenda is in the packet, so you can go through and look at all the specific breakouts and topics. But it's a wonderful meeting, and even in discussions with our executive officer, we've both found it historically extremely valuable to have the opportunity to meet with other chiropractic regulators, state licensing board members in the state. And typically FCLB will bring other leaders in the profession to that meeting. So there was a presentation by CCE and an update, also presentation update by MBCE. And then there's large breakout groups, and we do topics, everything from general regulatory topics to disciplinary topics and board operations. And there's a lot of really good discussion and really good information and kind of a 10,000 foot view of how a lot of other boards are handling these things, and gives us a sense of, we share a lot of the same issues, regulatory issues. And so extremely valuable, and it's really good to just kind of get to know others that are doing this work in other states and other areas. They also have a chiropractic board administrators group or committee, and our Ms. Walker, our executive officer, has participated with some of their work. And there's also a group called their chiropractic board legal advisors. So they have legal advisors from all the different states and regulatory boards, and they have a committee and a work group there. And I've actually reached out to our board legal advisor, Sabina Knight, and offered to kind of loop her in there also. So if she's able, I think that would be fantastic. And as everyone knows, FCLB offers our board a number of different products, including our CSP, which we heard about today, but also, they run PACE, which is a providers of approved continuing education. They run what they call the the chiropractic assistant. It's the Triple CA program. It's their chiropractic assistant training and kind of certification process. So if there's any other questions, I would entertain those from the board. Okay. Last note. Oh, yes, Dr. Daniels. I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Yeah.
There
I
you go.
just had a quick question on the questions that were posed for general discussion and stuff like that. Was there any consensus, plans for a consensus, and were there any notes provided answering those particular questions?
Yeah, they and I think it came out too late to put in the packet. So I'll see if staff can include the overview of the board meeting and the summary that is sent out by FCLB, and we'll post that to our webpage. It's not detailed, but they do kind of a broad general consensus on and ideas that come out of a lot of these questions. It really is, to be honest, a meeting that you sometimes have to be in the room to really hear all, some of the details on the discussion. But they do put out a summary, and I'll see if board staff can post that for the public, and then also make sure it gets in the hands of all the board members. Any other questions from the board? Okay, and last note, they do have an annual conference coming up. It's spring 2025. Let me look at the dates. Are April 30th to May 4th. So I would love to see us have board members attend as possible or as available. And then of course they'll have another district regional meeting again. That is late September, and that's going to be in Omaha, Nebraska. And they usually, because they do two districts between their regional meetings, it usually goes back and forth between District 4 and District 1 is kind of who we're aligned with. So if you have your calendar out early and you'd like to attend, please contact me or anyone or Dr. Adams or anyone else on board staff, and we can start to get the ball rolling there and see if it's possible. So, and no other questions. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 7? Open it up for public comment, please.
We are open for public comment on agenda item 7. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, if you're having trouble finding that hand button, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... and cycle through the 3 different pages you have in order to find your hand. As a reminder, people will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 15-second warning before your time expires. We're going to give everyone just a few more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment on agenda item 7. Seeing no request, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 8. And do we have Miss Bucciarelli on?
Yes, she's present with us in the Eldorado room.
Okay, great, thank you. So we're gonna have an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I'd just like to welcome back Miss Judy Bucciarelli, and she will provide the board with an update on the Department of Consumer Affairs. Ms. Bucciarelli, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm not going to repeat my name again because everyone knows who I am, I think. Thank you for the opportunity to join your meeting today, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you again. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the board for your continued service and dedication to protect the consumers of California. This afternoon, I have a brief report to share with you that will cover topics related to new business and travel reimbursement program, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and general information about this year's Our Promise campaign. And with that, I'll move on with my report. First, the California Department of Human Resources, also known as CalHR, recently released an updated travel policy to align with federal policies as outlined by the U.S. General Services Administration. Effective October 1 of this year, DCA started using the federal standard meals and incidental expense rates for in-state and out-of-state travel. DCA will also use the federal standard and non-standard reimbursement lodging rates. Information on these changes were shared with the board leadership at the end of September. Board members are encouraged to become familiar with the new travel expense reimbursement program and rates. Board members may contact Board and Bureau Relations with any questions regarding these changes. Moving on, DCA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee will meet tomorrow to elect a chair and vice chair, discuss language access, workforce development, and review the DEI committee's membership application. New unconscious bias training for board members. I'm excited to share that DCA is updating its current training to specifically focus on board members, your critical roles, and how unconscious bias may affect your decision-making authority. The training is self-paced and available in DCA's learning management system. We anticipate launching this new training in early 2025, and board members are required to take this training annually. As a reminder, DCA offers over 20 online DEI training courses in LMS. While these other courses are not mandatory, board members and board leaders are strongly encouraged to take these trainings as you are instrumental in leading department-wide change. And finally, I have some general information regarding this year's Our Promise campaign launch. Every year, state employees come together to pledge their support of nonprofits that provide critical services to our communities. As you remember, this annual giving campaign is called Our Promise. From October through December 31st, employees and board members can give a one-time donation or monthly payroll deduction to a nonprofit of their choice. These contributions have a positive impact by providing vital resources to those experiencing poverty, homelessness, and food insecurity, and also provide support to notable causes such as veterans, animals, and the environment, just to name a few. This year's DCA Our Promise efforts will be led by Monica Vargas, Deputy Director of Communications, and Karen Navarro, Assistant Deputy. Please be on the lookout for the official Our Promise launch announcement soon. In the meantime, you may contact Board and Bureau Relations with any questions about this year's Our Promise campaign. This concludes the DCA update today, and I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity to join your meeting today. At this time, I'll turn the meeting back to Dr. Paris, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you, Ms. Bucciarelli. Let me open it up to the board for any questions.
I have just a simple question, and it might be just deferred to a later to be answered. For for donations part of the giving campaign, does if any board members were to make a donation in that specific window of time, does it have to be for it to be recognized kind of in this particular campaign? Does it have to be done through kind of the internal system, or can we provide a receipt of a donation that was made in this window of time? Here's something to.
You know, normally with state employees, we get a form and we complete it. I am unsure what the process would be for board members. Kristen, are you?
Yeah, we'll look into that and report back out to the whole board on the Our Promise campaign for board members, because there are some differences in staff. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? No. Ms. Bucciarelli, I have a question. Am I understanding this correctly that the state travel is now aligned with the um, reimbursement for just say hotel, the same on the same as level as the federal reimbursement?
Okay, I'm going to defer to Kristen on this.
Dr. Paris, yes, that's correct. Our program hasn't been traveling much on state business. So they just as of October 1st is when they did that alignment. So for the most part, it's aligned with the federal standards as far as hotel reimbursement rates, with just a few qualifiers on the meal reimbursement rates and some of the miscellaneous provisions. So we'll forward that information out to the board. But yeah, the good news is for all future travel that we're doing, we're no longer bound to those lower California rates that we were using. It's now the federal state rate for our travel.
Okay, thank you. I would just add that I think that's a large improvement to the comfort and probably availability of board members when they travel. So thank you, DCA. Moderator, hearing no further questions from the board, can we please open agenda item 8 for public comment?
We are open for public comment on agenda item 8. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find the hand. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. And we are going to table agenda item number 9, review and possible approval board meeting minutes. And I'll let Miss Walker will kind of cover some of the obstacles and the rationale for this a little bit further in her executive officer's report. But we are going to table agenda item 9 for the January 2025 board meeting. And moderator, we can proceed to agenda item 10, please. Yeah, Dr. Daniels, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I know that she'll address it a little later, but I do feel very frustrated with this, and I know there's some challenges, and I realize that. But I feel like this is a symptom of sort of kind of where we are at. And you know, I think some of the board members don't really rely on the meeting minutes or don't see the value in them, but I personally use them to get reacquainted with what we had covered. It helps me to stay focused on where we've been, where we need to go. And we'll be 5 meetings behind. And if the intent is to be an accurate record, I think it starts to become a little unreasonable for people to really remember over a year ago of the agenda items. And so I know there's some staffing issues and other things that Ms. Walker will address, but it becomes a slippery slope for me when we start putting things, you know, we start tabling even small things. So I don't expect a comment back. I just feel the need to say that, you know, it's becoming frustrating for me, and I think we need to do better. And I know we have challenges, and I think the meeting minutes may seem unimportant, but I feel that they are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your comments, feedback, and surely further addressed later in our meetings. So appreciate that. Okay, agenda item 10, review and possible ratification of approved Doctor of Chiropractic license applications. Let me open this up for any questions, discussions, or motions from the board.
I'll motion that we approve the Doctor of Chiropractic license as so stated.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none, moderator, can you please open agenda item 10 for public comment?
We are open for public comment on agenda item 10 and the motion. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, please raise a hand by tapping that ... and cycling through the 3 different pages to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. And Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Sweet.
Yes.
All right, motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Moving to agenda item 11, review and possible ratification of approved continuing education provider applications. I would open this for any questions, discussion, motion from the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the continuing education provider applications.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
One question, just making sure to call out the item. I saw the additional documentation that there was kind of clarification of the name. I'm just making sure that it landed in the right place where it was supposed to be in terms of name-wise. It's on like different documents saying different things, so I wasn't sure.
It did, yes.
Where did it land?
We have the proper name for today's agenda, and then also there was also some additional material substantiating kind of the purchase of the building or of the business with other licensees branding on there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Only discussion piece.
Okay. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, moderator, would you please open agenda item 11 for public comment?
We are open for public comment on agenda item 11. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping the hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device, you may not. For mobile device, you do that ... in order to find your hand. We're going to spend just a few more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Sweet. Motion passed.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item 12, our executive officers report and updates. I will turn it over to Ms. Walker.
Thank you. And I'd like to begin by welcoming Andrew Trout and Harmony DiFilippo from DCA's budget office. They're going to provide the board with a presentation on our budget and fund condition, and then we'll move to the remainder of my portion of the report.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Andrew Trout, and I'm a budget analyst at the DCA budget office. I'm here alongside Harmony DiFilippo, budget manager. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me to present on agenda item 12F, which involves the board's fund condition statement. I will be reviewing the board's fund condition statement. As a reminder, we read this document top to bottom and left to right. The left column is the board's prior year 2023-24 actuals. It shows the board began 2023-24 with a balance of 1.880 million. The board collected 5.299 million in revenues, with 804,000 from initial license fees, 4.166 million from license renewals, and 329,000 collected from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenue. The board expended 3.896 million, which includes 327,000 in direct draws to the fund for statewide pro rata and pension payments. Based on pre-actuals, the board ended 23-24 with a reserve balance of 3.033 million, or 5.8 months in reserve. For current year 24-25, the board projects revenues of just over 5.07 million, with an 872,000 projected from initial license fees, 4.023 million from renewal fees, and 179,000 from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenues. The board's 24-25 expenditures are currently based on the governor's budget at 6.315 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund, leaving the board with a fund balance of just over 1.542 million, or 2.9 months in reserve. The fund condition shows the board spending to its full appropriation. However, the board historically reverts each fiscal year, which should continue to sustain the fund balance for the foreseeable future. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as we continue to close fiscal months in the fiscal year 2024-25. A few things to note for the board's fund condition. The fund condition is a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving expenditure increases in future years is a result of personnel service adjustments. These include general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these incremental adjustments. You will also notice revenue is projected status in the out years. Current year is based on the governor's budget and will be updated with fiscal month projections at the next meeting. Lastly, I would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would create cost pressure on the fund. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep an open line of communication with the board's executive staff for any future needs or expectations. That concludes my presentation. Again, thank you for allowing me to present at today's meeting. I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board.
I have one question.
Please, Dr. Adams.
How much longer are we on the repayment? What's the repayment of the loan that we got from the Vehicle Inspection Repair Fund? I know it looks like we've resumed that payment.
Yes, it is an estimate for right now. I believe it is another 6 years, but I don't have that information right in front of me.
Thank you.
I will check
Andrew,
on
that's
that
correct.
for you and we'll get back to Kristen with the exact date.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
This is Jeanette. Question, and just seeing as though we're in October, that leaves us with 2 more months beyond this. Are we anticipating any specific, how do we anticipate ending the year with this, with these numbers? Are we anticipating any specific underruns from whether it be kind of staffing or kind of, pretty much numbers going different ways than anticipated or projected?
So right now, the current projections for current year 24-25 only include the budget. So those have not yet been updated with fiscal months for this current year.
Yeah.
At the next boarding meeting, we will have a better update with current year projections that will give you a better picture of how this year looks.
Yeah, thank you. And I keep forgetting you guys are, what's it called? July to June. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, Hearing none, Ms. Walker, and thank you, and I'll let you take the floor, Ms. Walker, and continue.
Sure, thank you. So while we're on the topic of the budget, also included in the meeting materials, we've got 2 budget letters that were released from the Department of Finance that we're currently working through the department. One of which is a reduction in our spending for outgoing fiscal years, and then the other one is taking a look at a vacancy reduction plan. We've gone through that drill with the department. It's been submitted, and we're now waiting for the response from Department of Finance if our plan is approved. The challenge with that plan is that with us making that submittal, we've identified certain positions or a position that potentially could be eliminated, but then also provided justification and reasons why we need an exception for other positions that are vacant. Unfortunately, that leaves us in a position right now where we can't actually proceed with any of our recruitment efforts on those positions that we've earmarked as being accepted or exceptions to that drill until we get the final approval from the Department of Finance. So that was the other kind of portion of the budget update. And then just to respond a little bit further on Ms. Cruz's question about the current fiscal year spending, those, like the budget office mentioned, those projections are assuming that we spend our full fund. As far as looking at this fiscal year, it's early on for enforcement, so I can't quite make a projection just yet on what our enforcement spending is going to look like. It's historically under budget, but we definitely will have cost savings as far as personnel resources in this current fiscal year. But then as we're starting to look out into next fiscal year, it's very likely we'll be spending the full allotment of our personnel costs. So any further questions on the budget before I dive into other portions of my report?
Question for me. You mentioned, what's it called? We're going to have to hold off on recruitment efforts. What is kind of the anticipated timeline for that to resume?
At this point, we don't have an estimate. We follow up. I actually contact the budget office regularly, trying to check in to get an estimate. They submitted it, I want to say about 6 weeks ago. So it's been submitted. Quite some time has passed, so we're optimistic that we should get a result soon. But at this point, they haven't been able to share any timeframes. Okay, seeing no other questions. I wanted to highlight a few other items as far as my report today. First of which is just to take a moment to echo Dr. Parris's comments about staff. They've been incredibly flexible during these timeframes with not only being open to cross-training, some redirection as necessary, but they've also been very open and engaged in some of our ongoing evaluation processes and improvements in our licensing and our enforcement units. So it's been, they've just been a tremendous help. They've a lot of flexibility, a lot of new skills as they're learning different desks and different tasks. And then also just sharing different perspectives. When you take staff from enforcement and they're working on a licensing function, sometimes they have different perspectives that they can share as far as process improvement. So it's been a very collective effort when we're looking at just kind of the day-to-day work that we're doing and how can we improve timeframes, how can we better deliver services, and we're seeing a lot of those benefits through some of this cross-training. Also on the topic of staffing, I am happy to share that we did fill 2 of our positions over the summer. So unfortunately, our camera isn't working, but present with me in the room. Here you go. She's actually going to put her on camera here, but we have Lynn Reinhardt was recently hired as our new enforcement manager. She brings quite a bit of management experience and also enforcement experience from the Department of Insurance. We're very, very happy to have her here with our board. She's really just dove in and hit the ground running as far as really helping with our staff and kind of our improvements and process changes that we've made in enforcement, but also diving in and helping in licensing as well. So very happy to have Lynn here. Happy to introduce her to everybody. And another hire that we made over the summer was we hired Natalie Mixon as a 3rd special investigator for our special investigations unit. With the addition of Natalie to our team, that special investigations unit is now fully staffed. And we also are seeing some pretty impressive investigation timeframes out of this team. Particularly, we've, about a year ago, we started looking at our complaint intake and investigation processes, and we eliminated a step in the process between complaint intake and when it gets to the field for an investigation, and now going directly out of complaint intake directly to our special investigations unit. So we're seeing quite a bit of improvements there as far as timeframes on them just diving in and being able to make immediate contact with complainants within days of them filing a complaint, conducting initial interviews, and then carrying out the investigation and getting reports up to submittal for the rest of the process. So very impressed with that team. About a year ago, we had originally been planning to reclassify that third special investigator position as an analyst, but the Division of Investigation through DCA actually had released some case prioritization guidelines that were updated that shifted a lot of the casework away from D of I and back to the programs. So in light of that, we did move forward with fully staffing that special investigations unit. And like I said, phenomenal results out of that team. They're gonna do some great work, and I'm happy to share that. Like I mentioned, our ongoing challenge throughout this year has just remained with staffing and resources. The biggest challenge that we're faced with isn't the day-to-day work of carrying out licenses, investigating complaints, doing our standard work. It's more so in the area of development on policy, legislative matters, a lot of the other kind of program work that's being driven by the board, and then the staff work behind it in carrying that out. We did identify a few of our key roles that we want to fill when we are able to resume hiring. The most important of which is recruiting a new policy analyst to handle our legislative and regulatory matters. I'm going to work with the DCA Budget Office to also evaluate that position. It's currently classified at the AGPA level, and we may need to explore potentially upgrading that position to a higher level, just so that it can, act and take on some of the high-level policy and regulatory matters that we have an urgent need for at our board. So, going to be looking into that, and we'll be reporting back on findings on that classification at the January meeting. As far as our regulations work, that's been the crux of a lot of the work that has to get done at the staff level. Currently, we have 7 regulation packages that are in the production phase, meaning staff has to complete all of the documentation that has to be done so that we can release it out publicly through the Office of Administrative Law in collecting public comments. Likely after today's meeting, that number is going to increase to 9, and then we're expecting it to be around 11 to 12 after our January meeting. Our continuing education package really remains our top priority. It's also our most difficult package for us to get through. I echo and I hear a lot of the comments that we get from stakeholders, board members. I agree with you, and we are doing the best we can to get that done. The rulemaking file itself is quite extensive, but we are working to wrap that up and get it formally out to public comment so that we can really initiate that rulemaking process. Looking a little bit further out into December and January, we're going to be working on scheduling some committee meetings. We already have licensing committee on the calendar, but we'll work with the other committee chairs to look at some potential dates where we can resume some of our policy discussions on our pending enforcement regulations and also the chiropractic college regulations. Another item that came up during one of the recent committee discussions was around a new retired license status. So one thing, as we're looking into between now and the beginning of 2025, is potentially looking to work with the board and the licensing committee chair, Dr. Daniels, on potentially submitting a proposal for an omnibus bill to extend basically existing statutory authority that the other DCA boards already have to establish a retired license by regulation to BCE. We found a provision in the general B&P code that unfortunately doesn't specify BCEs having the authority, but just about every other program within DCA does. So we're going to potentially explore just making the legislative ask to extend that authority further to BCE. It would still involve then the board would have to, you could discuss and consider adopting language through regulation, in the coming years, but at least kind of securing that authority. If we can't get that through a bill in this next session, then of course we can address that issue during our 2026 sunset review. And looking forward into 2025, the major task ahead for us is our sunset review report. The report itself is going to be due likely in December of 2025 or January of 2026, and that's followed by that formal hearing process before the legislature in spring of 2026. Most of those activities are going to be coordinated through the Government Public Affairs Committee, so that's likely going to be our most active committee in 2025, particularly as we see our licensing and our enforcement committees wrap up a lot of the pending proposals that are before them, later this year and early into next year. Also wanted to share a brief update on Connect. So we're seeing some progress there on just expanding the functionality that we do have. We had been waiting for a while to get cashiering functionality in our Connect system. Happy to report that we're now in the testing phase of that. They provided us with 2 demonstrations of the functionality, and now we're currently working with 2 other DCA programs and DCA's cashiering unit to test out the functionality and make sure it works. Where this really would benefit the board is in cases where people are still submitting checks to our office. It phases out a 2-step process that's quite time consuming and wraps it into one cleaner, faster process. So we're really excited about that. And then as we're looking into 2025, unfortunately, our version upgrade has been on hold just due to resource issues with the vendor, but we are looking to move forward with developing our continuing education functionality to coincide with the release of our new continuing education regulations. So that really wraps up what I was planning to highlight during my report. I'm happy to answer any questions by the board.
Hey, Kristen, real quick, and I don't, and this may have been brought to your attention, and I meant to bring it up, but I've had a couple of colleagues of mine send me pictures of their renewal that they're doing by check. And the bottom where they sign their attestation, it states 2 questions. One is, do you have evidence to support that you have taken your continuing education? And if asked, you can produce it, right? And the second question is, have you been convicted since your last renewal of a crime? And then underneath that, it says, if you answer yes to either of these questions, give a detailed description. That doesn't seem like that's the way it should be answered, because the first question is just, you're saying, yes, I have proof that I took my continuing education. What's the need for the detailed explanation other than saying, yes, I have the proof?
Sure, and thank you for bringing that up. To clarify, so the printed renewal notices that go out are used by an offsite vendor. We transitioned, I believe it was over the summer, into a different print vendor, and they inadvertently were using an outdated template that was incorrect. So it was actually omitting one question, and then it had that language of, provide an explanation. The intention is that you're providing that explanation if you've been convicted of a crime or you've been disciplined within the previous renewal period. That's actually since been corrected for our November renewals. So those new notices that are going out are not only corrected, but we also clarified some areas on that form around if you're filing a new address. So we stopped asking the question about if you had an inactive license to disclose your address. We already know the address. That's where it went. And just we cleaned up that portion of the form. And we also did some format changes to, the top of the long form to better try to drive traffic to the Connect system. So we provided more detail on how you renew your license. 2 methods. Connect is the preferred method. Here's how you do it. Here's the timeframes involved, updated with realistic expectations of how long it takes for license renewal. Because that outdated form was saying allow 60 days for a license renewal. That's not our processing timeframes. It's days if you go online, and it's within 14 days if you do it through the mail. So we've updated a lot of that messaging, and all of that rolled out with our November renewals.
Is the Connect system functioning better, less buggy?
It's better. We're still encountering some bugs, so we're working with the department or our Office of Information Services on addressing some of the bugs. But we're seeing it's more reliable than it had been, and we're trying to still work those out. But it's better, and we are trying to drive the traffic to use that system just due to staffing and resources of not having to process paper renewals.
Great. Yeah, because every time I teach a class, I always refer people to start involving themselves to Connect. As soon as we can get more people we can get to migrate to that system, I think the better it's going to be. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I have Dr. Daniel's hand, and then Ms. Cruz after that. On mute, Dr.
Yeah.
Daniels.
I got it. Again, I just had, a few comments, and I appreciate the update on the proposals and that the CE package is, top priority. I'm super concerned that, with the I guess I'll just call it a hiring freeze, or just not being able to fill these positions. And we're short-staffed, and we have 20 proposals that have just, for the large part, kind of been sitting there. And I know that we're short-staffed, and the regulatory process is extremely cumbersome. But when we voted on it in 2023, April, I just sort of feel like, for lack of a better word, that I was sort of duped into voting for the whole package, because, what I heard was that it would be more efficient and we would get it out. And by the time that we are able to get it out, it really feels like it's becoming a hardship. That our main issue is to take care of the public and the stakeholders. But if we are stressing our licensees and creating sort of havoc, that does increase occupational stress. And then, people just don't do as good of a job. And, I, even on the board, I don't need to do my CE, but I still do it. I haven't had an x-ray unit in my office for 15 years. I refer out for it, but I still do my supervisor x-ray every 2 years. I do my 10 hours just to keep reviewing, stay on top of it, because I read x-rays all the time. And there's already, a reduction in classes that I can take. And, I don't need them right now, but other people do need them. But so the availability, because of this limbo with CE that we haven't been able to move through. And again, I'm not assigning blame. I'm just expressing, just such frustration, and really just feel, it's difficult to have confidence and trust and be motivated to continue to work on these proposals when, we're just struggling. And like I said, I'm concerned with the future if we just don't have the people to get it done. And, when there's an issue or two sides, I really do always try to understand what the other side is saying, even if it sort of seems like, nonsensical. And I just feel like it's gotten to the point where, on one side, it's, we're short-staffed and, it's really cumbersome. On the other side, they're whining, and this perception of sort of back and forth. And, both are true and both really matter. And I just feel like we just need to do better and be more respectful on both sides as far as, getting this done. And, from a small business, standpoint of being for 30 years being self-employed, it can be mind-boggling to people who aren't in government. We have to adapt very quickly. We have to make quick decisions. We don't have a backup. We don't have time to sit there and sort of wait for something to be done. So, I can understand sort of the frustration. We don't have paid vacation, sick days, PTO, 401ks, et cetera. So I just want to, voice that I don't want the people who are affected by this package to be sort of set aside like, oh, it's just, your business or whatever. And at the same time, we're struggling with staff and getting these regulatory proposals, done. So anyways, those are just my thoughts. And again, I'm super concerned for the staff, and, there's 20 big ones coming. The CCE, which I'll talk about in a little bit, really needs to get done. Anyways, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Appreciate your comments and feedback. I see Ms. Cruz has a hand up.
My questions are about the Connect system. You mentioned that the intention of removing the additional steps of checks would decrease the process. And I know it's still in testing, but what do we anticipate it to decrease the process-wise, time-wise?
As far as time frame for implementation or time?
Oh, like just like an individual process.
Oh, so it eliminates an entire involvement of a second person. So during the manual cashiering process, we've got a cashier that has to go through each check, log them in an Excel spreadsheet, stamp them, and go through an entire process. Then they need to shift to a second desk due to separation of duties, where then someone has to manually go in and key that license renewal. So it's a two-step process. What this functionality would allow for Connect is rather than, so that first step of the process with the manual cashiering becomes just data entry into the Connect system. It generates receipt numbers. It generates the daily deposit report that needs to be submitted. Okay. But at the same time, that cashier in real time is linking those payments to those licenses, so that when they submit the daily deposit report, there's also just an automated message that's sent to our central database that's going to roll all the license renewals. So it's
part of the workflow.
Exactly part of the workflow. So it's going to basically get that person into the same queue that they would be in had they renewed online and eliminate that entire second step of keying the renewals.
And I'm wondering now, what's it called? In terms of back to still with the Connect system, what are we seeing in terms of renewal usage online versus not online?
We're still struggling on renewal usage. We're going to measure. Particularly interested in looking at our renewals for November and December birth dates, because that's when that new messaging went out about with more of an emphasis on using the Connect system. I want to see what that's going to translate into as far as numbers. But where we're doing really well in the Connect system is our new applicants. New graduates are jumping in there, diving in. Upwards of almost 90% of our new applicants are going through the Connect system for their license, and then then their subsequent renewals. We occasionally are seeing those new applicants that started in the Connect system, but then send us a paper form. So like to pull a couple of them and just kind of pick their brain of why they did one versus the other. But we're seeing it more in the new applicants.
That's good. It's really good. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Are there, Ms. Walker, I'm going to let you continue on. Is that?
Those were the primary items that I wanted to share as far as my report. Like I said, just that's the status of what we're working on now, and then looking forward into 2025. That big message ahead is we've got sunset coming up. So we've got to do our report. We've got to kind of polish up looking at some of those outstanding issues that remain from the last sunset review, and then also it provides an opportunity. So what's next? And that's going to be the discussion that we're having at committee levels. Is there's these pending proposals and ideas that have been working through the process. What does the board want to focus on next, and what does the board want to spotlight for the legislature? So that'll be the discussions for next year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hearing no further questions, discussion from the board. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 12 for public comment?
We are open for item 12, the EO's update. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find your hand. People will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 15-second warning before your time expires. And it looks like our first request comes from Marcus Strutz. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
That work?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So just rebounding off of what Dr. Daniel said and what Kristen Walker said, there are continuing holes in the continuing education page on the board website. As I'm sitting here listening to all this, I'm just going through the classroom and distance learning courses by date. For October, it goes through the 10th of October and stops. There's no other dates listed on the board website for any of those. And many of the months are that way too. So someone, I'm not sure where, but someone's dropping the ball on just doing a simple listing. So I get phone calls all the time. How come there's no courses on the board website? I said, I don't know. So that needs to be addressed for sure. The seminar provider list is outdated. It's July 18th of 2024. That needs to be updated for sure as well. So there's just, and I'm hearing the short staff over and over and over again. But I'm not sure why some of those months are complete, some of those months are not. So someone's missing something there. And I've shared that with the board a few times. And I've had to resend in all my dates twice now. And it's just, I don't know, there's some holes for sure. And I'm not pointing blame, but someone's dropping the ball. So that needs to be fixed for sure. And just what Dr. Daniel said, just times two. I'm very fearful that the board is just kind of having 12, 15 things to do, and I get it, there's all those things are important, but the CE rules regulations is extremely important to all the chiropractors involved, all the CE providers, and the board itself. Would make life a lot easier if it just got done. And I'm very fearful that it's being dropped and people are not paying attention to it and just kind of going, oh, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It's like it matters tremendously to many people. I know I'm the only provider talking, but I'm probably representing at least half the profession in what I'm saying. So, and I've sent surveys out before, and 97% of the chiropractors want those regulations to go through. And so I'm speaking for more than just one person, and I don't know that people are paying attention to how many people I have contact with. But I've sent those reviews last year, the year before that, with all the surveys I've done and stuff like that. And when the former, we won't mention names, but when the former board chair was in charge, they were just kind of disregarded, and that person's no longer there. So I know Dr. Paris is paying attention, which is awesome. So I appreciate that time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your comments and feedback, and we are listening and we do take it to heart. So thank you very much.
And that was our only request on WebEx.
Okay, great. Can we please close for public comment? Okay, before we move to agenda item 13, I want to, on behalf of the board, welcome our new staff and employees. So welcome Lynn and Natalie, and hope you're enjoying your time, and hopefully we'll all get to meet you at a face-to-face. So moving to agenda item 13, update and discussion on implementation of 2024 legislation affecting the board. And Ms. Walker, you have the floor.
There we go. I unmuted myself. So this agenda item will be actually pretty straightforward. When we last met in May and we were looking at bills that could potentially affect the board, effective January 1 of 2025, there was a longer list. There were a few bills around for more expedites for our licensure processes. One of those bills, the board was cut from. Another bill died and was not passed. So when we look at what we have to implement going into 2025, it's very straightforward. It's very easy. It's Assembly Bill 1991, and it requires all the DCA healing arts boards to require that a licensee who electronically renews their license to provide their national provider number or identifier, NPI, if they have one at the time of renewal. And our implementation plan is also very straightforward, quite simple. DCA's Office of Information Services is making changes to our existing healthcare access and information HCI workforce data survey that's already live in the Connect system to just simply make the disclosure of the NPI number mandatory if the licensee indicates that they do have one when they're completing that survey. Currently, that question's optional. So as far as implementation, that's being handled directly by DCA. We'll be testing to ensure that it's been completed prior to January 1 so that we meet the implementation timeframe. But happy to report not a lot in the area of legislation implementation for going into 2025.
Okay, thank you. Let me open this up for any questions, comments from the board. Dr. Daniels, I see your hand up. You're on mute.
Unmute.
Dr. Daniels.
Yeah. I don't want to hear you guys hear other things. Okay. Can you please explain the rationale for the NPI number? It's not a big deal. I just don't really get it. And then also, can you share with us which bill we were cut from?
I'll answer the first question first. I don't have the bill number in front of me, but it was we were removed from the bill that would have required boards to expedite licensure for applicants that were going to work in a medically underserved area. So that was the bill that we were eliminated from over the summer. As far as the rationale behind AB 1991, it's my understanding that that bill is tied to just overall workforce development for the healing arts professions in the state. They wanted better data around measuring trends over time with the different professions. And one of the ways I believe they're intending to do that is through the tracking of an NPI. All of that is, separate from DCA. They just have this simple bill that mandates that we collect the data, but it's being used by other departments for measuring our health workforce data in California.
I imagine across states.
Potentially.
Okay, that's trying to understand.
Any other questions, comments from the board members? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Moderator, can you please open agenda item 13 for public comment?
We are open via WebEx for agenda item 13. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find your hand. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, moving on, we took agenda item 14 earlier, so we're going to skip to agenda item 15 and discussion and possible action on the practice of chiropractic on animals, including certification programs. And I will let Ms. Walker provide the report.
Sure, thank you. So from the outset, just want to clarify, this is an item where we're simply requesting a policy discussion from the board. During some of our board meetings, there's been numerous requests for during the public comment and future agenda items for the board to engage in discussion on animal chiropractic. A little bit of background and history. In 2023, the board was briefly approached by some stakeholders with some questions around the topic of animal chiropractic. And a lot of the questions there was, well, can the board regulate this? Can the board address this through, some sort of regulatory proposal? And the answer was a clear no. The board doesn't have statutory authority to regulate the practice of animal chiropractic through regulations. It would require some sort of legislative effort. Because as we know, that's regulated by the Veterinary Medical Board of California. Then in 2024, kind of throughout the year, there's been some discussion as far as the potential for legislation in this upcoming session in 25-26 around the topic of animal chiropractic. So to potentially provide some sort of pathway for certified animal chiropractors to be regulated through the Department of Consumer Affairs. It's a little bit of background information that we have in the meeting materials as far as the nature of animal chiropractic as it exists today. Like I said, the board's regulations only address the practice of animal chiropractic on humans, not animals. The Veterinary Medical Board is the one that primarily investigates these type of complaints. When we receive complaints about animal chiropractic, we're looking from the lens of, are they under the supervision of a vet? Are there concerns there? And we share information quite frequently with the Veterinary Medical Board. So within their act, of course, they regulate the practice of veterinary medicine. It's a crime to practice veterinary medicine without a license. And within their regulations, they've carved out a system through which a licensed doctor of chiropractic can perform what in their regulation is defined as musculoskeletal manipulation of an animal, which is the closest equivalent to what we understand to be animal chiropractic. They allow that can be performed by while under the direct supervision of a veterinarian with a protocol that's spelled out in the regulation. Requires that supervising veterinarian must first complete initial examination or before performing treatment of the animal. They then have to, the chiropractor has to consult with the supervising vet to confirm if that musculoskeletal manipulation is even appropriate and to coordinate the treatment of the animal. And then while it's being performed, that supervising veterinarian must be on the premises in an animal hospital setting or in the general vicinity if it's a range setting. And then the supervising veterinarian is the one responsible for ensuring accurate and complete records of the treatments that were performed on the animal. As part of kind of the discussions and just bringing awareness on animal chiropractic to our board. Did take a look at a few models in other states, which are outlined in the meeting materials. There's a few different pathways for the regulation kind of across the country. There's some states that simply have some sort of exemption from the Veterinary Medical Practice Act for chiropractors who have completed an additional certification program specifically on animal chiropractic. There's other states such as Colorado with much more extensive registration requirements that are involved. So there's a few different just kind of approaches that are being taken nationally when it comes to that issue. Most recently, there was a bill in Kentucky that would have the animal chiropractors certified by the Kentucky Veterinary Medical Board. There's other models where these chiropractors are regulated by chiropractic boards. So there's quite a variance when you look at what's going on nationally on the issue. Also in New Hampshire, there was an effort that was ultimately vetoed by the governor. So just a lot of variation in there. When you're looking at those different issues, we just wanted to kind of bring this to the board for an initial policy discussion. At this point, there's no legislation that's been introduced. There's nothing, of substance in that regard to be trying to take a position on. It's just simply to engage in a policy discussion on just the nature of animal chiropractic as it exists today in California.
Great, thank you. So let me just open the discussion up, comments from our board members.
I had a quick question regarding the American Veterinary Chiropractic Association. Are they a recognized association by, say, like the FCLB? Have they gone through a vetting process, and is their program been certified or accredited by, kind of in conjunction with the veterinary, maybe an international veterinary medicine board? Do we know?
Dr. Adams, I'll let anyone else on the board or Ms. Walker weigh in here. Not that I am aware of. I don't believe it's when we look at specialty certifications or diplomate programs, et cetera. Traditionally, we've relied on our two national associations as the ACA and the American Chiropractic Association and the International Chiropractic Association to kind of, approve or certify those programs, and their bodies underneath are those associations. The AVCA, I don't believe is under either one of those. And if that's incorrect, or if there's any other information, open head clarification.
And I'm curious, to our knowledge, has there been any negative feedback from these states or from the board level? I mean, when we've had this we've had this regulation in place since 1998, so we're coming up on almost 30 years of a coordinated relationship between some veterinarians and chiropractors. Have we had a lot of complaints about lack of safety on the part of the chiropractic practitioners that have engaged in those relationships with veterinarians? I haven't heard any. I've heard nothing personally. I've heard lots of positive things about chiropractic care of animals, and under the auspices and direction by the veterinarians that they've worked with, and that I've never heard any negative. Kristen, do we have anything at the board level or that we've had reported to us from the veterinary board that chiropractors that are working, not obviously anybody that's not complying with the regulation, but that have been working with veterinarians?
To my knowledge, no, we've not had any complaints against chiropractors that have been working within the confines of the existing regulation relating to the quality of care or anything to that nature. The only complaints that we receive are around basically the unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine for not staying within the confines of that regulation.
But are those complaints because people have complained that the chiropractor? I mean, I'm not discussing the validity or lack of validity, but have those complaints been because of injury to the animals, or because they're just not happy that somebody's doing it without a license? And when somebody is complying with the regulation, have there been any complaints about from owners of animals that the care that they provided was subpar or not appropriate care? Deemed appropriate by the veterinarian?
The complaints that we tend to see on the topic are primarily around advertising. That's the vast majority of when we get a complaint around animal chiropractic. It's either identified or filed anonymously around advertising. We do occasionally receive a complaint about a specific animal or care that was rendered. Sometimes those complaints, you know, I can't say that there's been anywhere it's like injury driven. A lot of them, they're driven more in a dispute between the animal's owner and the chiropractor, either over cost or understanding of what was going to happen or treatment plan or something to that extent. So no, that we're not seeing them. We don't have any data at this point from the Veterinary Medical Board. And I don't know, they're likely in the same position that we are, where there's not a very effective mechanism for even tracking cases at that level of detail. So it'd just be more anecdotal, if anything.
Mm-hmm. So as far as we know, there's not an issue with the care as there might be with advertising and those types of things. And certainly where a chiropractor has been following the regulation and working with a veterinarian, we're not seeing a rash of complaints about the care there either, right? Or any
That's correct.
Complaints, right? Okay. And it's my understanding that we have about 80 or so chiropractors in the state of California that are currently, is that right? Roughly that number working with veterinarians?
We don't have any data as far as the number of just generally licensed chiropractors that might be working with veterinarians. It's not something that we specifically track or really have any access to data around. I'm not sure that VMB would have it either. But when we were kind of just looking at the topic and looking at the AVCA and the IVCA certification programs, we took a look at how many their certified chiropractors were on those lists, and we were estimating it was around 50 in California.
Do we have any information on how the other states have been functioning and how it's been going in the other states? I mean, we got 5 states that are allowing direct access, so.
Not yet at this point. Like I said, if there's a bill that's introduced in the new session, that's definitely going to be one of the concerns there, is reaching out and kind of discussing with those boards how it's working, where they already have an existing model. But no, at this point, we haven't done that research.
Okay.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
I think there's, on the AVCA, there's 43 DCs that are certified, and there's 7 DVMs. So that might be why they're, Ms. Walker comes up with about 50, but 7 of them are licensed veterinarians on the AVCA website as being registered. And Ms. Walker, I think it was mentioned that Colorado might have had some complaints, but there was no details given. So I think, we do need to, if anything comes forward, we would need to reach out and find what those are. My understanding from the people who are certified, their concern is that people were getting hurt from lay people, and that there's no way to regulate that. They don't have any training at all. And there's question as to the certification program and its, robustness and validity. But that aside, there's anecdotal reports of animals being injured. There's a famous one on a horse's neck being broken, the pedicles. But it was, from my understanding, 2 people from Australia that weren't chiropractors or in the state of California, not licensed, and they were anesthetizing the animal, and chiropractors don't have access to drugs. So they were anesthetizing the animals, and that's how they were able, and they did a crude, HVLA, and so it's a pretty well-known, case or whatever. So there may be others on that, I don't know. But again, those were the horse was completely anesthetized. So I don't know if it was an unlicensed chiropractor from Australia. I don't know who the people were, but I asked a vet about it. And so that's kind of the story of those injuries. But, because we're not, this is something that is in the hands of the profession. This is not the board's job. We're not actively spending resources on investigating this, so we don't have, as Ms. Walker said, there's no bill proposed. So that's kind of what I know. And Ms. Walker, the list that I had is states that currently allow direct access. And again, this is just the list that I got. I don't know if it's accurate. It was Arkansas, Colorado, Ohio, Oklahoma, Utah, Nebraska, Nevada, Arizona, and Kentucky. And then the states that are pursuing it was California, Texas, Missouri, Minnesota, Iowa, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Illinois, and Washington. So I don't know if that helps at all. And Ms. Walker, I don't know as far as the list goes, because again, we haven't spent time on this. It's just was, brought to us. So I don't think we have all those answers.
Well, it's certainly not an insignificant amount of states. That's, I mean, you described, a pretty good percentage of states that are at least looking into or pursuing the ability for animals and their owners to have access to that care. I'm curious, and I'm kind of coming new to this a little bit, and that is manipulation part of the veterinary curriculum, core curriculum?
It's considered a complementary and alternative medicine, and it's typically, there was a survey done, there was 43 out of 49 schools offer one course. I'll just call them CAMs. That's what they are in humans, but they're CAVMs in animals. And only one of the schools require that. So it's not, there's a very specific definition of CAMs by the American Veterinary Medical Association. It's a heterogeneous group of preventative, diagnostic, and therapeutic philosophies and practices, which are not traditionally included in veterinary curriculum and may differ from scientific knowledge. That's just a quote from, that's not me, that's just a quote from the American Veterinary Medical Association. And so it depends on which school you go to, but it's not a core curriculum.
So would it be like an elective type thing?
Yeah, there was only one school that required it. So the rest, I guess, would be called, I don't know their program. I guess the rest would be called electives. And that it might include, anything that is, complementary is along with traditional medicine that has scientific basis. Alternative is that there is no veterinary medicine that the animal's getting received, and so they're getting an alternative. So if they were getting gabapentin with acupuncture, that would be considered complementary medicine.
Got it. So what would you estimate the hours that a veterinarian might receive in the area of spinal manipulation of animals?
I couldn't answer that. Like I said, all I can say is that, they're generally not in the core curriculum. A veterinarian would be able to answer that. But I think that's why there's 5 certification programs in the United States for vets and for chiropractors. So you have to be a DVM or DC to get into the program. It's 210 hours usually. Lab hours, hands-on ranges from 60 to 110. They need to be recertified every 3 years. They must have a pass rate of 75%. And it's not necessarily, some math was done saying that it's a 5-week program. It's, I think some of the schools, it's not necessarily just 5 straight weeks. And they, have a particular curriculum, and there's 5 different options in the United States. One is called options and one is called ACEs, I think, as far as that provide this extra training that perhaps people aren't getting in school. And so for the DC, it's learning about animals, animal spines. For the vet, it would be learning about palpation and manipulation and other therapies.
Thank you. Sounds like further knowledge and understanding and discussion is warranted. Thank you. Those are all the questions I had.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. I do, as we mentioned, they recently had this discussion amongst their board, and it was a public call, and the recording's available out there. But I do recall hearing that it is not in the core curriculum generally. The musculoskeletal manipulation, as they term it. So.
And then one more thing from that meeting, just because we're using the term and it seems to be a bit of a hot button. Direct supervision means more like employment control or power and access. And so we're not really, even their statute talks about direct supervision, but it's really more of a referral that the chiropractor's working in that office. And so I don't know how it seemed to matter. And then when we use the term access, it's defining something that is, I think, more related to areas that are underserved or communities that are underserved. And so it's services that are unavailable, perhaps, and that's, I think one of the questions is, are these therapies available, not is there an access to them?
Is there any other discussion from the board? Again,
I'm sorry.
Please.
I want to clarify that for myself real quick, Dr. Daniels. So that's an interesting comment you bring up. So access, as it relates to whether the person can get the treatment or whether it's available. So it seems that since so many of the vets then are not specifically trained in this area, then availability and access kind of go hand in hand, right? Because if it's not an option, right? Because if I don't have a skill set and someone comes to my office, that person's not going to have access, nor will it be available to them in my office because I don't have that skill set. That's not to say that it's not accessible and available. It's just not accessible and available with me.
Correct. And I think that's you know, I'm just putting the lingo out there that I think there's stricter definitions when, you know, the groups talk about it. Access means something very specific, I think, to one side, and the other side is using the word access when perhaps availability is
More of an issue.
more of the terminology. And so they mean different things. But again, it's like with anything, are we speaking the same language? Do we know what those definitions mean? And are we expressing ourselves in such a way that we understand what one side is saying, what the other side is saying? So I think words are very interesting, and they mean different things to different people. So I only bring it up because I think if the profession or the group or whatever on their own does anything with it, then that we may see those terms coming up. So.
Well, and I think that's important. And for me, just to clarify that, because I think of it as that if we're saying like the veterinarians, if it's part of their license, you know, as a plenary license with all animal treatment, if they're then not performing a procedure, it's not that, and then or then blocking access to that procedure, or saying that procedure can only be accessed through them, but yet they don't provide it, then those terms matter a great deal.
Correct. And I hear what you're saying, and I'm just giving you what my understanding of the stricter definitions, but I think there is some language that, you know, like with anything, is going to need to be.
Well, that's really helpful for me. That's really helpful for me in going forward when we're talking, if we're going to enter into discussions, even with our own stakeholders or members of the veterinary community, that we need to be speaking the same language and understanding what each other's meaning is, I think, going to be really important. So thank you. That clarifies things well for me. Yeah, thank you.
And I don't know if Dr. Paris or Ms. Walker was going to touch on it, but I just wanted to make a note of thanking the vet board president and the executive officer, Jessica, for, clarifying a few issues as far as that it was brought to us as a conversation that the board hasn't spent resources on investigating this. And so anyways, I just wanted to mention that, I had one meeting that included Jessica, which was, great. And I think it was Dr. Grant that was informative. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I will say, I think, we were notified that this was moving. They were notified, and this is not a bill that the BCE intends to run or push, or this is not our bill. And I do think that we had really good discussions, and the process of us meeting and notifying each other of kind of getting ahead of it a little bit as best we can, and having these initial discussions. And I also would like to thank Dr. Bradbury, their president, and Dr. Grant, the expert that was on the call. And I think that's how these things should work. I think it's better for public protection, whether it's a human patient or an animal patient, or when boards can kind of work together this way and at least have mutual discussions on these issues. I do want to circle back. I see your hand, Dr. Daniels, and I'll let me make one comment. And then you're up next. To something that you said earlier about the assignment of liability or causation to some of the anecdotal stories that we have heard. And I will say we should move with caution in accepting those as always necessarily being DCs. We know in the the human patient care world, and there's been papers written on this. It's actually been studied, where they look back to chiropractic and liability or causation to a number of injuries, mainly in the stroke area and or other injuries. And what they found when they started digging into a lot of the anecdotal stories, even case studies that have been published in journals, that the person that was doing the manipulation was not actually a licensed DC. And in some cases, I mean, some outrageous things, like, I don't know, they were like a barber or something. And so far from even being trained in healthcare. And so I do think moving forward, that's something that, just to be aware of and to keep our eye on, that, sometimes these take on a sensationalism unto themselves, and just have to make sure we're talking about the issue that we're talking about, which is, trained and licensed, and, the accurate description of who's doing what, and not conflating that with unlicensed providers or somebody anesthetizing, maybe perhaps on, as your example, anesthetizing animals and doing things that are, as unlicensed providers, that really isn't the issue at hand, in my opinion. So thank you for bringing that up. And you had your hand up, so please, Dr. Daniels.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to say something based on what you just said. There does seem to be a lack of sort of knowledge, perhaps, or awareness of the DC's education. Many seem to not understand that, we go through a history, a clinical exam, an orthopedic exam, a neurological exam. We identify red flags, diff-die. We do imaging. We refer out to imaging. We refer back to MDs. We refer to, other people in our tool belt, whether it's PT, acupuncture, whatever it is. So there is a lot out there of sort of misunderstanding of that. And then also that there's the unlicensed individuals that are doing what's called an adjustment. And as we know, as being licensed individual, it's not so much, it is how to do an adjustment, but frequently it's when not to do an adjustment. That is, very important. But what I was going to just say, as far as the reason I think perhaps this is part of our discussion, is one, it was brought to our attention, and one of our values from our solid exercise that's in our mission statement and our goals, and Dr. Paris, you brought it up earlier, was that part of our values is to be responsive and proactive and efficiently responsive and address emerging trends and issues in the profession. And so that is simply the conversation falls in what we set out to do as far as having these conversations. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Any other points of discussion, comments from the board? Okay. Hearing none. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 15 for public comment?
Absolutely. We are open for public comment on agenda item 15. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... and cycle through a few different pages in order to find your hand. Our first request for comment is coming from BJ. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone. Are you with us, BJ?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to tell the board thank you for having Animal Chiropractic on the agenda today and discussing the issue. The niche of animal chiropractic is growing, and we appreciate you guys rolling through the discussion today.
thank you, BJ. We appreciate your comment and your supportive comment, and we're happy to have it on the agenda. So thank you very much.
Next, we're going to hear from Grant Miller. Hold on just a moment, Grant. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
My name is Grant Miller. I'm a veterinarian, and I'm the regulatory director for the California Veterinary Medical Association. Thank you very much to your board for discussing this important topic, and also for reaching out to the Veterinary Medical Board to get some background and history on the topic. The CVMA is strongly opposed to any attempt by human healthcare practitioners to expand their scope of practice to include animals. This has been an ongoing issue that our profession has successfully fought for decades, and we're intensely concerned that human healthcare practitioners feel that they can safely work on animals despite not having animals as part of their licensing curriculum, as part of their licensing aptitude testing, or as part of their continuing education required for maintenance of their license. You had already mentioned the successful regulation that we have in this state that does allow access to chiropractors by the public through a collaboration with veterinarians that has correctly, as you stated, been in effect for almost 30 years and has worked quite well between our two professions. One of the reasons why we feel that it's so important to have veterinarians involved is because there are vast anatomic, physiologic, and behavioral differences, not only obviously between humans and animals, but between animal species themselves. There's dozens of complex diseases and medical conditions that can manifest and involve the musculoskeletal system. Many of them present to a layperson as resembling a chiropractic issue, and so people might instinctively want to seek out a chiropractor for something that actually is a complex medical condition. So a mere certification course cannot adequately train someone to know and understand all of those diseases without formal veterinary education. And to permit someone to practice on animals without that knowledge presents an unacceptable level of danger to animals and risk to consumers by any standard, but especially here in California, where our regulatory boards have a track record of raising the bar in consumer protection. We're concerned that to suggest that a chiropractor can obtain all of the necessary education and training needed to safely manage animal patients without the oversight of a veterinarian causes great concern to our profession. To that end, if it seems plausible that after taking a certification course, a chiropractor could expand their scope of practice to all animals despite their licensing education focusing only on human beings, then why not create a pathway of reciprocity? Veterinarians are fully trained, prescribing medical doctors with extensive education in all body systems. Therefore, if we were to take a month-long certification course to learn about performing chiropractic adjustments on human beings, could we then justify changing the law to permit us to practice on them? Thank you for your consideration. I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We appreciate your comments and thoughts.
And those were all of our requests via WebEx.
Okay, great. Can we please close the public comment? Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the public comments, and appreciate your feedback, and happy to have you on our call. So really appreciate you taking the time to call in and listen into our call and give us feedback and thoughts. Appreciate the board discussion today. As we know, this is early stage. There is no bill, there is no language to consider. So at this point, we're really just looking forward to continuing our discussions with the Veterinary Medical Board on this issue as it moves forward. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to ask that we are able to take a 10-minute bio break before we jump to agenda item 16. Is that any objection? 5-minute break? Is that okay? Okay, as long as there's no objection from the board, or if staff needs a longer break, Ms. Walker, let me know. But let's come back at, it is 2:42. Let's come back at 2:48. That'll give us an extra 60 seconds to actually make our way to the wherever we need to go. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And we are on to agenda item 16, our licensing committee report. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Daniels to provide an update on the licensing committee. Dr. Daniels, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So we have a few things to discuss. And so I think I'm going to start with B, which is review and discuss and possibly act on the recommendation to add the new regulation to the inactive licensees. Ms. Cruz and I and staff have looked at it for quite a while, and I do want to thank, apparently there seemed to be some regulatory struggles with what to me seemed pretty straightforward, but you know, they're always, what I'm learning needs to be a justification for things. So anyways, thank you for kind of really working on that. I appreciate it. And Ms. Cruz and I and staff have looked at it. If you could go to agenda item 16, attachment 1. And we really, it looks good to Ms. Cruz and I. Like I said, this is kind of what the regulatory proposals came from our discussion, but hopefully I wanted to get the board's opinion on it. Like I said, we've looked at it for a long time, so fresh eyes need to be looked at it. And so the suggestion is if you guys are happy with it, then we can make a motion to approve it and move it forward. But I wanted to have a conversation, obviously, about everyone's thoughts on the board as far as attachment 1.
I make a motion that we accept agenda item 16, attachment 1, as so stated.
Second.
The motion language is on page 95 of the attachments. I can read it out loud. I'm the regulatory counsel, Stephen Vong. The suggested motion is to approve the proposed regulatory text for California Code of Regulation, CCR, Title 16, Section 310.3 in Attachment 1, direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulation at CCR Title 16, Section 310.3 as noticed. Thanks.
So no additions. I know we made a motion in a second. I mean, no additions to the text.
I have none.
Do we need to re-motion based on what was stated by Stephen?
This is Sabina. Anybody who would like to make that motion that Stephen stated can say so moved by, how Stephen stated that, because it is a long motion to reread, and then we'll need a second.
Okay. I'll reiterate my motion as outlined by Stephen.
And second. Is there any discussion from the board? Hearing no further discussion or questions, Moderator, would you please open this agenda item and this motion for public comment?
Before we do that, can I make a point of clarification?
Sure, please.
Would it make more sense for us to address all the motions that the licensing committee is doing and then open it for public comment as a whole, or do we have to do it individually?
This is Sabina. I prefer each of the motion to be on its own, especially since there might be different motions or different information in each motion. It'd just be a lot cleaner for the record.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, moderator, can we please open agenda item 16, motion 1 for public comment?
Hi, Dr. Paris. This is Amanda. I will be covering for our moderator. He will be returning shortly. But in the meantime, if we have any members of the public who would like to make a comment on the motion as stated, please raise your hand. If you're in WebEx, you can just click the little hand icon. If you are joining by phone through the app, you'll need to select the ellipses and scroll through until you see the hand icon. We'll now take a moment to see if anybody has a comment or has raised their hand. All right, seeing none, would you like me to close public comment?
Please, thank you. Ms. Cruz, would you please call a roll for the vote on the motion?
Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Mr. Sweet,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you very much. I will turn this back over to Dr. Daniels.
Okay. C, the review, discuss, possibly act on committee's recommendation to repeal Title 16, Section 315. I'll have Ms. Walker, you can sort of jump in a second, but it's the reason for this. I believe they had to go through and check the different sections, and this one is redundant, so that was why the suggestion for the repeal. Business Profession Code sections 820, 828 already provide DCA with the authority to order licensees to be examined. And so you see the suggested motion, but I will let Ms. Walker add anything to that.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Dr. Daniels summarized this regulatory proposal quite well. So just to clarify, this isn't going to impact or take away any of the board's existing authority with addressing these types of issues. Within the general V&P statutes that we have, there's already authority for DCA healing arts boards, including BCE, to order a licensee to be examined whenever it appears that they may be unable to practice safely, either due to an impairment due to a mental illness or a physical illness affecting competency. These are the provisions of existing law that we already rely on when we need to use that tool, and we do frequently use it throughout each year, just as cases arise. As part of the board's strategic plan, there was that objective of addressing just some obsolete regulations that no longer need to be on the books, and that's where we came across Section 315, which was last amended by the board in 1977, and it provides some similar authority, but not even quite as broad as what we have in statute, because it's limited to mental illness whenever reasonable cause exists. So it's a little bit different standard that gets applied, but that's not a regulation that we're currently using. We use the statutory authority. So this is a cleanup proposal for the board to go ahead and formally repeal this regulation because it's redundant. We don't need it, and we've already got plenty of tools using the statute.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Let me turn it back to the board.
Motion approve the proposed regulatory text and repeal California Code of Regulations, CCR Title 16, Section 315 and Attachment 2, direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and repeal the regulation at CCR Title 16, Section 315, as noticed.
Thank you. It's a mouthful. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. And let me open this up for any further discussion amongst the board. Hearing none, moderator, can we open up agenda item 16C for public comment?
We are open for public comment on 16C as in Charlie and the motion before us. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. And Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
And Mr. Sweet?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you very much. Let me turn this back over to Dr. Daniels.
Okay, so on the following page, the next regulatory proposal, this is on applicants. So this is different than a licensee. This is somebody applying. So it's for applicants. And it was 2016 that the board at the time was developing this package to authorize the board to have applicants for licensure undergo mental or physical examinations. And then subsequently, there was a bill 2138, which is in your packet, effective 2020. And it sort of limits that regulatory language, and the board is only authorized to deny a license on the grounds that the applicant has been subject to formal discipline. And so the suggested motion or proposal is to rescind the board's August 29th, 2016 motion. And I think some of the questions are like, you need to have evidence to substantiate the need for such an exam, and that's not clearly defined. And you know, they're applying, they don't have a license yet. And so that bill 2138 sort of limits what you can not give a license to. And then again, we have other tools in the toolbox to deal with if there is a case of mental health or illness that is endangering the stakeholder. And again, I'll give it to Ms. Walker to clarify anything that was not said.
Yes, thank you. You summarized that one well. So with this, like she had summarized, so this is one of the CPEI regulatory proposals that had been pending before the board. And this language was approved prior to the passage of AB 2138, which really narrowed the board's authority when we're looking at the grounds in which we can deny a license to an applicant. Prior to 2020, the board had much broader authority beyond just convictions of crimes or discipline by another agency. It was much broader. So there was a lot more back in that time as far as reviewing applications and the types of kind of applicant investigations that were done at the time versus now. We're very limited in the information that we can get. So under our existing statutory authority, it limits those actions that we can use to formal discipline or conviction of a crime within the previous 7 years, with a few exceptions for very egregious acts, but don't have that same washout period. As part of the application process, staff does still evaluate and investigate those substantially related convictions or disciplinary actions that are subject to the board's scrutiny that fall within the statutory authority of what we can look at. And as part of that evaluation process, the board staff then evaluates whether or not an application should be denied on those grounds. If that application enters the denial process, there's already a tool available for the board to order these types of mental or physical examinations of an applicant to ensure safety as part of the denial and statement of issues process. Where there is no authority is outside of that existing process. We were looking at this proposal, and the challenge that was before us was what other evidence would the board receive outside of that conviction and disciplinary history that would be able to substantiate the need for an examination of an applicant. And the issue is we don't have any examples that we can cite. Of course, there's the broad argument of protection of the public, but we just don't have enough data or any real mechanism to where we would even receive that type of information for us to be able to demonstrate the necessity of proceeding with this regulatory package. As Dr. Daniels mentioned, we do have the two pathways. So when there's substantially related convictions or disciplinary actions that are of concern for public safety, we deny the application, and then we can work with the applicant to potentially put them on probation and impose these type of standards. Or the other option that's available to us is if we happen to receive information outside of that process that's of concern, they can be licensed, and then after they become a licensee, we can use the existing statutory authority to require them to be examined using that authority. But to try to pursue additional authority for an applicant outside of that process would just it'd be difficult for the board. It'd be difficult to really substantiate the necessity. And then, as we've talked about on this call, we also have a pretty substantial regulatory workload as it is, with some more important proposals that need to pass. So that's the justification behind it. And the request is for the board to consider making a motion to formally rescind that August 29, 2016 order to initiate a rulemaking to adopt California Code of Regulations Title 16, Section 321.1, which is now referred to as Section 324. And that prior text is in your packet, attachment number 4.
Thank you. Let me take it back to the board. Is there any discussion or a motion from the board?
Anybody else want to make the motion?
I motion to rescind the board's August 29, 2016 order to initiate a rulemaking to adopt California Code of Regulations Title 16, Section 321.1, now Section 324.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you.
That was an easy one.
Any further discussion, comments from the board? Okay. Hearing none, moderator, can we please open agenda item 16D and the motion for public comment?
Absolutely. We are open via WebEx for public comment on 16D as in Delta and the motion before us. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes, sir. We have Dr. Paris.
Yes.
Dr. Adams.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniel.
Yes.
Mr. Sweet.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you very much. Okay, and I just want to thank Dr. Daniels.
Oh, I have more.
Oh, you have more? Okay, I'm sorry. Where did I miss that? Okay, go ahead.
I went
Please.
out of order because I know it's getting late. People are getting a bit
Okay.
punchy. I wanted to get those done.
My fault. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
How much more? Sorry.
Settle down. It'll be all right. Okay. So the board, the committee, sorry, is continuing to work on what's listed there. We still have practice locations, display of license, retired license status, and we also have reciprocity. So those have been in the mix of the conversation. We sort of felt the inactive license was more of the priority to get that out, and then we will discuss it. But I think the practice locations is probably that, with the curriculum, which I'll talk about in a second. We're still having conversations about those. And Ms. Walker already kind of mentioned the retired license, sort of a one-time fee processing. It would say retired on there, gives people an option to not have their license, say, forfeiture or cancellation. And then things to consider, say they go into retirement, they want to come back. We want to align with, I think it's in enforcement, that same 4-year period as far as taking part 4, jurisprudence, all that stuff. So we kind of want licensing to align with enforcement as far as what is the time frame of how many years has passed, and then what do you need to do to come back. And I think that's very clear in the interest of public safety. If I've been out for 10 years and I've just been retired and I can come back, 10 years is a long time. So we're having all those policy discussions. And then the bigger one, which is the continued conversation with curriculum. And I'll just make a brief statement, and then I'll let Ms. Walker sort of explain kind of where we're at with that. And I apologize, I may read my notes a little bit. So first I want to say it's been brought to my attention that there simply are some untruths about the board and the status of the curriculum and what's happening with that. And there's a document that's being referenced, and it was approved by the board in 2020, and it's being referenced as being a done deal in solving everybody's problem with aligning with CCE in the curriculum, and it's just simply untrue. And it's to me, it's causing more harm to keep having this sort of rhetoric go around. The document that is being referred to was approved by the board at the time without any proper meaningful vetting of the issue, and would not have passed, and Ms. Walker can explain it more. I believe I'm not misspeaking, but it would not have passed the OAL process as it stood. So, end of story. There is no document that our board is refusing to pass or to sign or to move forward that would solve everyone's problems. The board is not the school's adversary. We're not CCE's adversary. This largely comes from the Practice Act. That was a legislative process enacted in 1922. This act, therefore, has limitations that many seem to not understand, and we cannot change it without a legislative process. This would require a ballot initiative, and this needs to come from the profession, not from the board. So if there wants to be blame put, it maybe make you feel better, you can, put it on the profession if need be, but it has to be a ballot initiative. So what we have, and what the current board, or at least Ms. Cruz and I have been working on with staff, is the truth is that we've been working really hard on identifying what the problems are, what the difficulties are with the school, and we've identified what that is. It's over prescriptive, it's over regulatory, it's antiquated, and it needs to be moved forward. And one of the issues is the 90% attendance. So, all of those things as far as the documentation, their interview process, attendance, all of those requirements that are currently in the regulation, we're working very hard to get rid of. But in order to do that, we need justification. We need to say why we're going to be aligning with CCE. So, and again, Ms. Walker will explain it more, but we can't just say, oh, that's what we're going to do. We have to define the date. We have to consider people that came before, people who are coming after. So, in general, with what I'm learning with the regulatory process, with a justification, you need to have the background. We need to have a problem statement. We need to have what needs to be fixed and identify the proposals that would address those problems. And so that is what has been being worked on. Now, given the fact that it is an act, there's certain language in there that we cannot change. And I personally have spent hours reviewing reviewing CCE guidelines, reviewing the act, reviewing the terminology, and how we can incorporate it and modernize those areas with contemporary language. And so that we can justify, stay within the act, get rid of those regulatory prescriptions, and free up the colleges to kind of do their thing. Now, that is not to say that the legislative process doesn't perhaps need to happen in the future, but if this part can move forward, it's going to be much easier, and it's going to be much faster. Even though it's glacial, it is going to be much faster than the latest legislative process, which perhaps will have problems and not pass. And so I just want everyone, and hopefully people are listening, that there is no document. It wasn't a one and done. We're not ignoring it. We're not, we don't have malintent or uncooperation. I've, like I said, spent hours and hours on this. And so I believe where it stands, where we left it, and Ms. Cruz and Ms. Walker can corroborate or not, is that on the sticking points that we have on the language that we cannot change, which is more so with the curriculum, not all the prescriptive stuff, that I've asked for sort of an outline document to be sent to the schools and people involved in the stakeholders for their suggestions on how that they could realistically navigate that, because it also then falls into reciprocity. So if we say that in the act, dermatology has to be a class given, and a school in Florida doesn't have dermatology, they want to be come to California, we do have to address that. So how can we address that? What are those options? And so I want the schools' feedback as to the stuff that we're stuck with. What can we do in order to not violate the act, explain the act, modernize it, contemporize it, and then move forward? So with that, Ms. Walker and Ms. Cruz can add if I missed something or clarify, and then open it for discussion. Hopefully it is clear.
Oh, no, you covered it very well. Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Just to kind of add on, so that discussion, when we're looking at those chiropractic college regulations, we've gone through kind of painstakingly detailed where there's redundancies between the CCE standards and our existing regulations. So there's clear justification there for reasons for repealing, and that is the direction that we're moving on them. The one challenge still remains around that curriculum requirement, and we're constrained in a bit with Section 5 of the Act. One of the key, there's basically 6 different points that you have to clear as far as part of the regulatory process. One of them is consistency. So we're going to have a challenge. We cannot move forward with a regulation that's inconsistent with statute. So we're trying to find a creative way to kind of balance both, be not quite as prescriptive, but still be consistent with the statute. So that's kind of the last piece that's remaining. We've gone through and looked at all the other different aspects of the regulations, the application process, the types of reports. We looked at things like we've got regulatory language that mandates that the schools provide us with annual reports. We looked at, well, what are they giving to CCE and where can we just leverage that and request a copy of that report versus having them send us reports. So we've done a lot of work there. It's just that remaining item is around the curriculum. That's the last piece of the puzzle, and we're hoping that we can have that discussion with the licensing committee at our December meeting and bring something forward to the board in January for approval, but that's where we're at on that issue. So thank you, Dr. Daniels. You summarized that quite well.
Ms. Cruz?
Oh, nothing in addition to me. Okay.
Dr. Adams, Dr. Paris, Mr. Sweet?
I don't have any further questions. I really appreciate that update. This is profession-wide. This is, one of the really important issues for the stakeholders, education, et cetera. I guess I do have one quick question regarding the what you mentioned survey or contacting the colleges for feedback, and I'm wondering, are we leveraging the Association of Chiropractic Colleges and routing any potential feedback or information through them? They seem to have a really efficient communication channel.
I mean, I'll let Ms. Walker answer that. I think it was kind of at least the document I had in mind was very specific to what the educators need and how they can solve the problem within their arena with where we have the sticking points. So we need solutions. And so I'll let Ms. Walker answer that on the association.
I agree. For the regulation package that we've been working on and developing now, it was driven from the approach by the colleges with their problem statement. I would say that ACC is one of the organizations where there's a lot of opportunity there for further engagement and more collaboration. So we'll look forward to reaching out to that organization and sharing thoughts there as well.
Okay, great. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I will say one thing. Yep. I really want to give a lot of credit to Dr. Daniels. I really mean, it has definitely been a learning experience for me, kind of navigating through a lot of, so as much as I love policy and regulation, I think it's just me better understanding the profession as well, and kind of the path it takes for folks to navigate the profession itself. And as we see, obviously, the change in kind of the pedagogy, but also the change in just how education is now being done, in kind of the way the education space has evolved and changed. It has been definitely, I would say, an enlightening experience. So I want to thank you for kind of the guidance of Dr. Daniels, and I'll say all of the work that the team here has done.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work for staff, and I mean, we just have a lot of proposals that have just been sitting there, but I think it's moving forward, and I feel like we're closer. So thank you, everybody. And now I'm done.
Well, I would thank you for that. This is, I'm really happy that we have a board member that can be our subject matter expert and do all the research and take the deep dives that we need when we're having these discussions. And so thank you very much. And Ms. Cruz, thank you to you too. This is the heavy lift committee is, I think, the licensing committee currently. So appreciate all your hard work.
Excellent work.
Okay, I think, is there anything else in agenda item 16? No? I don't think so. Okay, let's, moderator, can we please go to, oh, yes, I'm sorry. I was about to skip that. Can we please open for public comment? Thank you.
Absolutely. We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We don't have any call-in users or mobile device users anymore. So we're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no requests, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, moving to agenda item 17, review and possible adoption of amended 2022-2026 strategic plan. And I will turn this over to Ms. Walker to introduce this agenda item.
Thank you. So just briefly, as the board recalls, in September of 2022, Governor Newsom, through an executive order, strengthened the state's commitment to a California for all by directing state agencies and departments to take additional actions to embed equity analysis and considerations into its policies and practices, including the strategic planning process. So as the board members recall, at the May 2024 board meeting, DCA's Solid Planning Solutions facilitated a brief strategic planning session for the board to examine the current 2022 through 2026 strategic plan and provide an opportunity for the board to create or modify any of the goals or objectives within that plan based on the executive order. So during today's meeting, within the meeting materials is the work product from that session. The board's asked to review it and discuss, and the board can consider adopting it. For ease of reference, within that attachment, the modifications that were made by the board during that session compared to today's plan are indicated with bold text. So with that, just turning it back over to the board to discuss that plan.
Okay, let me, thank you. Ms. Walker, let me open it up to the board for any discussion, comments, questions.
I think it looks great. Motion to adopt the amended strategic plan of 2022 to 2026.
I second.
I'll second.
Beat you.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I would just say I think it's a great kind of living document that just kind of always has improvements to it. So thank you for that. And if no further discussion from the board, moderator, would you please open this agenda item and motion for public comment?
We are open for public comment on agenda item 17 and the motion. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you. Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Yes. Okay, Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz? Yes. Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving to agenda item 18, nominations of candidates for our 2025 board officer positions. And I think Ms. Knight, are you going to take this over for us?
I can if you prefer.
Sure. Yeah, please. Thank you.
Oh. Sure. Okay. So as we all recall, we'll take nominations for the 2025 board officer positions, and then in our next meeting in January, sorry, we'll do the elections. So we'll go in order as listed here in the agenda. And so under 18A, the first one would be board chair. Do we have any nominations?
Do we want a roll call for nomination or just raise our hand?
I would just raise your hand or interrupt or whatever you see fit. You can nominate yourself if you'd like, or nominate someone else.
I would like to nominate Dr. Adams for chair.
Thank you. Dr. Adams, would you accept that nomination?
I do.
All right. Any other nominations?
I'll nominate Dr. Paris.
All right, hearing none. Oh, sorry?
I'll nominate Dr. Paris.
Oh, well, will Dr. Paris want to do that?
Well, I thank you, Mr. Sweet. I'm really happy to hear your nomination. I think at this time, and I would decline the nomination.
Thank you. Totally up to you and understandable. So we have any other nominations? Nope. Okay, seeing none, we have one nomination on the agenda for January for chair. Any nominations for vice chair? Okay, Dr. Paris.
I would, well, I would like to nominate Dr. Daniels as vice chair.
And Dr. Daniels, would you accept that nomination?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other nominations? Mr. Sweet could try for Dr. Paris again, but or not.
Don't tempt
All right,
me.
hearing
Don't tempt
none.
me.
Hearing no others, we can move on to the Office of Secretary. Do I have any nominations for that position?
I'll nominate myself.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I don't have to ask her if she'll accept it. It's a self-nomination.
Efficient.
Yeah.
I was going to nominate you.
So you're like double nominated. Are there any other nominations for secretary? All right, hearing none, looks like we have our slate for January for chair, vice chair, and secretary. Thank you all, and I don't, if you'd like to do public comment, but I don't think anybody's on the line. There's no public here.
I maybe just just open it up. Just in case somebody wants to jump on for public comment.
We definitely have people on WebEx, just none on the phone or mobile devices. We have regular computers logged in. So with that said, we are open for public comment on the nominations. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We're going to wait just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Silence is golden.
Okay. Thank you very much. We can close that, and I just want to congratulate the nominees. I think we have a wonderful board, and I'm happy to see it move forward. And Mr. Sweet, thank you for your vote of confidence, and I really appreciate that. I think it's time to shuffle the deck a little bit here, and I'm confident anybody can fill the roles that we've nominated for. So, thank you, appreciate you all, and moving to agenda item 18, or no, wait, I'm sorry, 19. There we go. Scratch that. Our schedule of our 2025 quarterly board meetings. Ms. Walker, are you going to lead this for us? And if I could make a suggestion, are we gonna do like general time frame and then maybe doodle poll for the specific date, or are we gonna try and set all the specific dates today?
Ideally, Dr. Paris, if we could leave today's meeting with defined dates. We put in the meeting materials a selection of dates that we've already vetted that work for staff, they work for our DCA legal counsel. So if we could just facilitate selecting those dates, that would be ideal. And then we can, from there, proceed forward with scheduling committee meetings through doodle polls for 2025.
Okay, that sounds great. Go ahead.
So for the first one, we suggested 5 different dates in January of 2025. From the staff perspective, there's not a preference, although later in the month is always beneficial for us to have just a little bit more time between holidays and prepping meeting materials. But again, any of those 5 dates, whether it's Thursday, January 9th, Friday, January 10th, Thursday, January 16th, Thursday, January 23rd, or Friday, January 31st are all available for staff and legal. So if anybody would like to maybe propose one of those dates, and we can see if there's a consensus.
I can do any of them except the January 31st date.
Okay, so we'll remove that.
And I can't do the 23rd or 24th.
Ditto for me on the 23rd. I can't do that date.
Not that, so the 16th.
I could do any of them.
Are there any conflicts on Thursday, January 16th, 2025 for a platform like today, WebEx?
We're just doing a 1 day, correct? Just a 1 day?
Just a 1-day WebEx meeting like today, no petitioners. Petitioners would be in April and October.
So the 16th?
Yes, Thursday, January 16th.
Okay.
I'm unavailable that day, but I'm gone the second half of January, so none of those dates work for me. But if it works for everybody else, then go for it.
Do we want to look at Friday, January 10th?
I can do that.
Any opposition to the 9th?
I can do that.
You can do that too.
No opposition?
It sounds
No
like there's
opposition?
yeah.
No opposition to January 9th?
Correct. So we'll plan that one for Thursday, January 9th, 2025 through WebEx. Okay, and then April of 2025, we were only able to identify 2 sequential dates that staff and legal are available. So that's Thursday, April 17th and Friday, April 18th, or Thursday, April 24th and Friday, April 25th. The intention for that meeting is to hold an in-person meeting. In Northern California, we'd likely be trying to target maybe the remaining chiropractic college, so we can potentially reach out to Life West and see if we can host a meeting there. Or otherwise, we can look at government offices in the Bay Area.
I've recently spoken with Dr. Oberstein, and he's very open for us to come and be on campus. He would make it available to us. Absolutely. If we give the notice for that. Yeah, and that would be that'd be a 2-day, right?
A 2-day, yes, with regular business on the Thursday, followed by petition hearings on the Friday. Unless we happen to only have, one petition like today's meeting, then we would consolidate it down and just host the meeting on Thursday. But we'd like to put on the calendar and earmark the 2 days just in case we need both.
So the 17-18 or 24-25?
Yeah.
I have a conflict the Friday, the 25th.
What about the 17th and 18th?
17th and 18th I can do.
Does anybody else have a conflict? Okay, can we do that?
Sounds good. So we'll email these out too, so everyone can put them on their calendar. But so April 17th and 18th, and then for July, we'd be looking at another WebEx teleconference meeting like today with no petitioners. There's a selection of dates in the meeting materials. So July 10th or 11th, 17th or 18th, 24th or 25th are all available.
I can't do the July 18th, but I can do any of the other days.
Okay.
So I don't normally bring this up. It doesn't apply to me, but I want to be sensitive. And that the April 18th, just as a reminder, that's Good Friday. Is that going to be a conflict for anybody? I want to be respectful of anybody in that regard.
I'll just be fasting. That's fine.
I'll be here. We won't eat food.
Well, I just want to be sensitive to making sure that we're and I don't know if some people have young children, because sometimes depending on what school your children attend, that could be a week off, either before or after Easter.
We could also potentially look at, so there's a conflict on Friday the 25th. You could look at the following week, potentially doing a Wednesday the 23rd, followed by Thursday the 24th. Or even in that same week, you could do the same thing. You could do Wednesday the 16th or Thursday the 17th, just to avoid that Friday. That's another option.
If Miss Cruz is expressing that she's okay with, I'm just wanting to be sensitive to that. Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that people were aware that before we did that, if people have young children, that they may be off that week, or if that could be sometimes if there's a religious conflict, I didn't want there to be an insensitivity there. So if Ms. Cruz, you're fine with that, I just thought I'd put it out there. Because I'm okay. I'm okay for the 17th and 18th. I just wanted to see if that was.
Yeah, let's go with the 17, 18.
Okay.
I'm
So then,
clear
are there any...
all of the July dates.
What were the July dates again? I'm sorry.
11, 10, 11.
10, 11, 17, 24, 25.
17, 18, 24, 25. Yeah, each week, 2 days available. I just put all these dates in your social page control board.
You got to do 2 days in July?
No, just one. Isn't it? Yeah, it's
I thought it was just one.
Yeah.
Just one date in July. And there's a conflict on the 18th. So looking for if there's conflict on any of those other dates.
Is there conflict on the 17th or the 24th or the 25th? Or
just the 18th?
You said the 25th. You said the 25th was a conflict for somebody?
18th.
No, the 18th.
It looks like the rest are Thursday, Fridays. So maybe if no one has a direct conflict, maybe we do a preferential day of the week.
Friday.
Fridays.
We did a Thursday already, so I mean, we want to try to be sensitive to some people, because I like Thursdays and I know some people like Fridays. So I like the fact if we go back and forth. So if we do it, let's do it for Friday the
25th.
The 11th or the 25th. 25th.
25th.
Okay.
Yes, that's my birthday week, so we're leaving that one alone. I didn't want to say it, but
That's fair enough. We did a meeting on Valentine's Day once many years ago, and my bride was not happy.
So we're doing. So the consensus was July 25th.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And nobody wanted the 11th.
no, I did not want the 11th.
That's her birthday.
Oh, okay.
That's my birthday week.
Come on.
And that's a WebEx.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And January 25th is WebEx as well, correct? So in person, April, WebEx.
January 9th.
January 9th. Yeah.
January 9th, WebEx.
Okay, good. Wow, I did not.
Okay. And then October, right, is the next one?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And is that one we're going to try to do in the South?
Yes, this would be one where we look at either going back to LACC or another location, either Burbank or San Diego were proposed. So, but definitely in-person meeting, Southern California. Again, selecting 2 sequential dates so that we can allow for petition hearings.
Yeah.
I can't do the 17th, but I can do the other days.
I can't do the 2nd or the 3rd.
Okay.
9th, 10th, then?
I'm good with that.
So 9th and 10th?
Works for me.
Okay. Cool. And you suggested we're going to do committees through Doodle Pool.
This month or December?
Yes, to set the 2025 dates, we can put that on the agenda if you'd prefer.
Yeah, I just think it'd be nail it out versus that doodle pool thing.
Sure, yes.
Thank you. Okay.
I think when we last spoke, Kristen, that you were going to do a doodle pool for the Continuing Education Committee for sometime in December.
Correct. We're looking at continuing education, enforcement, and government and public affairs, likely in early December. Let me check now. I just looked. Yeah, because we've got the board meeting being January 9th. Those committee meetings will be in December.
Okay. We should probably try to get those lined. We should probably try to get those lined up pretty quick. We're just going to do a 2-hour one, right, in the middle of the day, as we've done in the past.
Correct. Yes, we'll send out for availability today so we can get those additional meetings on the calendar. We have licensing committee for December 6th, and then we'll get the other 3 committees on the calendar.
We see. Okay. Anything else?
Nope, we're all set on this item.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Anything else from the board members? Thank you. That used to be an hour process by itself, so that was very efficient. So appreciate how flexible all of you are, and I'm sure Dr. Adams will too going forward. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Moderator, can we please open agenda item 19 for public comment?
We are open for public comment on the proposed schedule, agenda item 19. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. And we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 20, future agenda item. And so just to note, the members of the board and the public may submit proposed agenda items for a future board meeting. However, the board may not discuss or take action on any proposed matter except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. And with that, I will open it up to the board.
I don't know if it's an appropriate one, and I don't know if there's anything to do, but I was just wanting to know if we can have, like, if we should be having a conversation, kind of how to manage the workload and manage the proposals and the amount of meetings. So anyways, that would be my agenda item.
And I feel like it's kind of similar chain of thought. My mind's already going to sunset review, and kind of all of the things that are going to be packaged with it. And so I'm not sure what that agenda item would look like, but whether it be kind of the timing, the spacing, the level of effort, just so that we kind of as board members are ready at that point in time. So I just imagine it's just going to be a cycle of things coming throughout the year.
Yes, and that would be a good item for January board meeting, but also potentially government and public affairs
I think so.
Ahead of time, vetting some of that. So yes, thank you.
Any other future agenda items? I had one. There was a Ms. Walker. Unless I missed it, I don't. Did we discuss the Cal Cairo leadership meeting?
We did not. No.
Okay. Would you mind just giving a little background on the suggestion there, and then I think, and then my suggestion would be that we consider putting that either on the appropriate committee for future discussion.
Oh, sure. Yes. So the exact date is slipping my mind at the moment, but earlier this month, I participated in the California Chiropractic Roundtable meeting, the annual meeting that was hosted by the California Chiropractic Association. As far as that meeting, it was, we had representatives from the Cal Chiro Board of Directors, and we also had representatives from the chiropractic colleges. And we had a really good discussion around just kind of course, sharing updates and things that each of the organizations is working on, but sharing common themes and where are there certain areas where we're all kind of working towards similar goals, or where can we collaborate? And a couple ideas that had come to mind as part of that meeting was when we're looking at workforce development, it's something that you hear that, you know, the department's looking into workforce development. We're trying to establish and work on outreach when it comes to workforce development. So it's like, you know, how can we share resources across, you know, these other stakeholders? How can we partner together and work in that area? And the other thought that came to mind is, you know, in the effort of efficiency and the different ways that we're looking at just the licensure process, what it means to get a license, what do you have to go through to get it done? A thought had come to mind around the chiropractic law examination, and is there a potential or a pathway or an interest in exploring some sort of pilot program to allow for early access to the exam while you're in your last, whether it be semester or trimester of college, so you can potentially get licensed at the time of graduation instead of having to wait until after to take the law exam? Because we already know that model exists for the NBCE, that they're taking the exam potentially during school. So is there a pathway there for the CCLE? So those would be two potential future agenda items, partnering on workforce development, and then also, you know, exploring around some sort of model of, you know, licensure upon graduation. We've already really cut down licensing timeframes, but is there efficiencies to be gained even further by partnering with the colleges?
Like 80 credits.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would support and suggest that we place that as a future agenda item. Which does that go to licensing? I hate to feel like we're piling on with them, but
yes, but it also, yes, it would go to licensing. It also fits into the regulation that's already in the works on the initial licensure process. So kind of adding that consideration to it. Okay. Workforce development, partnering potentially looks at government public affairs.
Yeah.
But the other option, the other item would be licensing.
Okay, great. That's my suggestion as stated. Thank you for that. Is there any other future agenda items from the board? I had one and I can't think of it right now too. I was thinking about it while the meeting was going on today, so I'll have to circle back to it another time. Okay. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 20, future agenda items for public comment?
We are open for public comment on agenda item 20. If you'd like to make a suggestion for a future agenda item, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. We will call on people in the order we have requests, and we're going to take just a few more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, we made it. 21 agenda items and everyone's favorite at the end. I want to thank everyone and thank our, really think we had a lot of public comment and participation today. So again, we value that. We appreciate that. We thank you for being on our call today. And I want to thank staff for all their hard work, and to all the board members. Appreciate you all and thank you very much for your participation and engagement today. The time is 3:57 and I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Real quick, just want
My
to.
motion.
Oh, no. Just real quick, I just want to say, real quick, happy holidays, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your year. Great meeting, and I'm excited to go into 2025. Ready to do some more good work. Keep it going. We got a great group here, and I'm excited to work with everybody. It's been a wonderful day. And staff, thank you for making us look good.
Thank you for that. I would take a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
Go ahead, Ms. Cruz.
No motion. I motion that we adjourn.
I second.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you all.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Have a great rest of your day and look forward to seeing everyone again soon. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
one. Bye.
Bye.
And now he uses it.